much for coming, and welcome to our talk on accelerating the developer experiences at PayPal via the console. For just a quick introduction, I'm Pooja Reddiwari. I lead product for the Developer Console platform and productivity developer insights at PayPal. And prior to joining PayPal, I was a product manager at Workday, working in the tools and technology organization. I have graduated from the Carnegie Mellon University with a master's in IT, specializing in e-business technology. It's been almost a decade here in the Bay Area. Started off my career here as an application engineer at Oracle, then moved into product management, and now with PayPal on the DevOps team as a product manager. With that, from a personal side, I am a mom of a 4-year-old boy that's crazy about cars, so we spend our weekends doing some DIY projects, building cars. Currently, we're working on a garbage truck that's in progress. With that, this is Vladimir Bakwansky, my co-conspirator on the console project.
Hi, I'm the architect of the console, and working with strategic architecture. That means that the architect that does not own anything, just goes across all kinds of interesting things. In previous life, I was CTO of a custom development company, doing mostly systems in the area of big data, advanced technologies, often working with R&D outfits of companies, setting them up with new technologies, and traveling way too much. So with that, I'll let Pooja continue.
So let's get started. A quick agenda for today's talk. We'll be talking about what the current experience is for developers at PayPal, talk about some of the challenges we see, and introduce what we're doing with the console, really talk about what console is. Console is an interesting term where everyone has their own interpretations of what it does, so it's our opportunity to share what our version of the console is intended to do. We'll talk about our approach in terms of how we are delivering what we're delivering, and spend some time talking about the architecture overview, understanding what's really behind the scenes before we show you some of the console concepts in action. Finally, share some key takeaways before we end the session. Let's get started. As developers, we all love to build products, right? And the best thing that can happen is to have a seamless experience as we operate in the various phases of the DevOps infinite loop. But the reality at PayPal is that we have a wide variety of tools at every single phase of the lifecycle. You see some of the internal tools listed here as well. And again, this is by no means an exhaustive list of all the tools we have. This is just to share the idea as to how fragmented that experience is for our developers at PayPal. The closest we've come in terms of stitching this experience together from an end-to-end standpoint is via a tool called Ordnance. And we just wanted to spend a few minutes talking about what Ordnance is and what it does. Ordnance is one of the most widely used self-service tools at PayPal. Ordnance supports web application lifecycle management. So it provides the standard rails required for web application developers to take their code from inception to production. In fact, it is one of the tools that has been used for quite some time, for over a decade now. It really makes, we have a huge win with that already, right? So it makes automation for what we call the paved path experience a great success. It supports a limited number of stacks, but for whatever it supports, it does its job really well. It also provides for a means to inner source. So let's say there are teams that want to contribute and inner source and new functionality or capabilities. Ordnance supports that. But again, this is a tool that was existing. It's doing its job, and it's a huge win in terms of providing automation for the stacks that it supports. Just like any tool, Ordnance does come with its own set of limitations. The first one being it was built as an application and not really as a platform. Even though it supports inner sourcing as a means to extend the application, it is really acting as a bottleneck on the business velocity, because it is upon the Ordnance team to kind of like approve and merge the code, or approve all the PRs, review them before they merge it. And again, it's not a truly extensible model. From a functionality standpoint, it only helps the web app developers, and it does not cater to the needs of mobile application developers or even data developers, right? Whether it's traditional data applications or big data applications. So it's a big gap today because we also have to cater to the needs of the other developer segments. And finally, it does not have a great reporting capabilities. Discovery is one of the biggest challenges right now for us because there are all these tools and products and managed services that we cater to our developers, but for someone that's joining PayPal as a new developer, it's really challenging for them to go and find out what's available to them even before they start coding, like just trying to see what's there for them to start working on. So with that said, the challenges can be bucketed into 3 groups. This is like a high-level classification. Velocity is one of our biggest gaps today, especially with the model that we are not able to extend easily. And from a scope standpoint, like I mentioned, all this supports web application lifecycle management and provides all the rails required for deploying web apps, but again, does not meet the needs of mobile or data app developers. Discovery being the biggest challenge, especially when, as PayPal is trying to continue its acquisitions, when we have new acquisitions coming in, discovery becomes even more complicated because now we have to cater to the needs of all the other services that we are bringing in-house. For the rest of the talk, we'll be focusing on how we are solving for these gaps through the console. But before we get into the details of how we are approaching solving for these, I'd like to introduce the console itself to you. So as we were thinking about these gaps, and we wanted to take a step back to understand and do some real discovery with developers to understand their needs better. We know that these are the gaps with Altus, but how can we, as we are trying to approach building the next gen version of developer-facing tooling, we wanted to see what's missing, right? So as part of our customer discovery as well, when we met with developers, it was very clear that there was a need to provide them with a natural workspace-like experience. So when I say natural workspace, for a lot of product managers like me, a great example would be Jira or even Outlook, right? So we kind of use those tools day in and out to get our jobs done. So in a similar way, we wanted to have something for our developers. Right? What is that natural workspace? What is that thing, that tool or that platform that developers can go to on a daily basis to kind of get their job done? We said, well, that's going to be the console. So console is really that natural workspace experience for our developers so that they not only use it to kind of get their job done, but it also acts as a source of discovery. So in short, console is the platform that supports DevOps Lifecycle for our developers and also acts as a cloud-like service portal on top of PayPal's cloud infrastructure. So it's really a place where all the managed services can get exposed. We are opening up a marketplace-like experience through the console so that any service provider teams can contribute their offerings and get adoption through the console so that from an end user standpoint, from an application developer standpoint, discovery becomes easier, managing all the services becomes easier. They will be able to do their job right by coming into the console. We're taking a 3-pronged approach here, with self-service being the key. Altus also supports self-service. We want to make sure we empower the developers by providing a self-service kind of tooling so that they operate in a very flexible manner. Intelligence is something that we want to start embedding in the platform itself. So intelligence is definitely not an afterthought, and we want to make sure it's embedded right from the get-go so that we can cater to personalized experiences, and we can also move into recommendations and smart insights for that matter. And the final one that I want to talk about is building a community. If you look at the console, it's really connecting the 2 customer segments, the 2 developer segments. One being the application developers, our end users that are coming to the console so that they can, push their application to production or deploy their applications. The second group is the service providers. Most of the teams within our technology organizations would fall under this category, where they're building tools and services for the developers So these are the two teams or two customer segments that are coming together, and console is acting as a bridge connecting these two groups. With that, let me share a little bit about the two customer segments I just talked about. Really talk about what's in it for them from a console standpoint. And it's clear that for the application developers, console is going to be that one-stop shop or the centralized place where they can go and get their job done, like go through the DevOps lifecycle. From a service provider standpoint, this is my favorite part, right? So we keep getting this question from service providers saying, hey, what's in it for us? Like, you're saying come on board onto the console, but we're happy in our own worlds. Like, we have a tool, we have a UI, it's working. But the reality is console not only provides them with a platform to onboard, but it actually gives them all the hooks that they are required to do for instance, security. Every single team does not have to reinvent the wheel by working on role-based access control, all the RBAC, authentication and authorization services. They don't have to do anything in addition to what console provides if they onboard with the console in terms of analytics and instrumentation, observability, monitoring and observability, auditability, governance, and it also gives them hooks for things like notifications. Let's say I'm a service provider, I want to broadcast a notification to the developer community. And they can just leverage the hooks that console already has so that they don't have to do all of this. And from an offering standpoint, we are not just providing them with a set of APIs. We're actually giving them a UI SDK, a CLI SDK, and an API SDK. So let's say a service provider team wants to build a UI. They're having to, they don't have to like reinvent all the components with the UI framework. And we have our lead designer here, Eric, so he'll talk to you a little bit about the DesignOps later towards the end of the session. But just wanted to mention that there's a UI SDK, CLI SDK, and an API SDK that we are offering as part of the console product. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Vladimir to talk to us about our approach in terms of federated development and centralized governance. Over to you, Vladimir.
All right, thank you. So, when you think about the development of a tool like this, you have one desire, and that is to include additional functionality. Now, one of the problems with our previous tool, the Altus, was that the tool was developed as a monolithic application. It was very successful in the functionality that it delivered, but then when people experienced its power, then they were coming to the Altus team and they were asking, hey, can you do this for us? And as the number of such requests increased, the team itself became the bottleneck. So one way to try to solve that in an organization is through inner sourcing. Inner sourcing is something that is very similar to open sourcing, only it is done internally within the company. And with that, you will find interested parties who are willing to contribute. Then they would work on their part of functionality. You will have the governance and review, make sure that the contribution is of sufficient quality. And then that part is integrated and that becomes a part of the tool. And that is a great solution where both parties have strong motivation to onboard a new piece of functionality. But getting a new piece of code, I compare that to like getting a puppy as a gift. It is nice and cute in the beginning, but then there is a lot of maintenance around that. And the same thing is with the code that becomes then your ownership part of your code base. So instead of that, we were looking for a different solution, and that is something that we call federated development. That enables different teams who have interest in contributing or making tools that will become part of the solution to work on their own, completely independently from us. Ideally, they don't even have to talk to anybody. They create this new piece of functionality, we call this extension, and then this capability is dynamically added to the running system. So quite similar to the notion of plugins or extensions that you have in IntelliJ or Eclipse or VS Code. Only this is applied now for the tooling that sometimes needs to run on hundreds of servers and be truly scalable and be kind of deployed in the enterprise fashion. So with this federated development, you are able to multiply the effort. You can have many teams that are working in parallel. They can all deploy at the same time. So the ownership is distributed, so the bottleneck is removed. But there are a couple of things that you need to watch, and that is you need to have certain standards, you need to have documentation so people have ability to perform. And one of the things that we will need to work on more intensively is governance, because you don't want this to become a mess. You want the new extensions to have the proper look and feel and adherence to other quality standards that we have. So how are we going to do that? The idea is inspired by Lego blocks. And this is the Lego drawing from the patent, I think it's 1943. When can you play in the Lego system? You can play when you obey certain standards, and that is in this case where the pegs and what are the dimensions. Once you are compliant with that, you can build and have parts of arbitrary shapes. The same idea is with our new tool called Console, where we want people to be able to add their contributions, we call them extensions, and they would come with several components. They come with functionality, expressed through APIs. They typically come with CLI, and they could come with the user interface. And you can imagine this is interesting because when you're building the tool, you may create a CLI version very quickly, then try it out. When you're happy with functionality, then you can build the user interface and add it later. And the examples of extensions that we are building, for example, tool for dealing with Kafka. So traditionally, developer who wanted to work with Kafka and they would like to create a new topic, they would have to file a Jira ticket, then somebody would look into that, and possibly a few days later, they get the news, hey, there is a new topic created for you. With this self-service approach, the developer would go to the Kafka extension, enter a couple of parameters, name of the topic, size of the messages, and so on, hit submit button, and they get their topic in a few seconds. And you can imagine more complex extensions, environments for working with databases, environments that are including workflows or processes like in SDLC support and similar. So, and going beyond that, what is interesting, teams or product areas could create their own custom experience. So imagine, for example, you have a team that is dealing with checkout. They could create a landing page in the environment saying, welcome to the checkout team, here is our coding standard, here is the architecture of the system, here are the examples of code, and here are the key people who may mentor you in your onboarding of the system. So, the console itself is organized as a platform. There is the core, which is this big bluish area, and the console communicates through APIs to the user interfaces. There is the CLI, and we pay special attention to CLI, because the state of the art of command line in 2019 is rather unsatisfactory. Most programs did not make much progress since original Linux command lines since 1980s. And there are a lot of opportunities for improvement there. So we pay particular attention to CLI, and also the surveys that we had in our developer community were stating that one of the top priorities for developers is to have a really nice CLI. And we have been inspired by systems like Heroku and the great satisfaction that developers in such environments have. And of course, APIs for interaction with other systems. Inside the console, there are two key areas. One is a set of console internals, which is providing common services, and everything that console can actually do for developers is in extensions. So in that regard, the model is similar to what we have in VS Code or IntelliJ. In these areas, for example, your Java development environment, it consists of a set of plugins. So in a similar fashion, we have extensions that are actually doing the useful work for developers. So very simple architecture, but when you dig in, there are several parts to it. So I will start with this part here on the left-hand side. So this is the console internals. The most significant part there is what we call the extension manager. extension manager, is the part that allows extensions to be dynamically registered. It keeps track of the life cycle. For example, the extension is added, the extension is starting, the extension is running, it is being shut down, and it is removed from the system. This also supports the existence of multiple versions of an extension at the same time. In the bottom area, you have the common services that the console provides. And PayPal being a financial company, the number one capability is security. And this is interesting, you know, when you look into the state-of-the-art of tools in software development, this is actually the weakest link when it comes to security in an enterprise. And it is becoming the vector number one for attacking the company. So in our system, we use rule-based access control, which is going to be enforced for every interaction with the system. And you know, in a company like PayPal, you have to be paranoid about security, and every interaction needs to be monitored, and you want to make sure that you respect the rules. The second thing comes of being a distributed system observability. And basically, this is a system that gives you distributed tracing from the user request, from the UI or CLI, going through the console services, going to extensions that are typically running on different machines. And for this, we are expressing the interfaces through open tracing. Open tracing is a cloud-native computing foundation standard for distributed tracing. And it allows you to use a variety of backend systems. Some of these systems are popular tools like Splunk and Datadog and so on. So you can observe what is happening in your distributed application, visualize it, and troubleshoot it. The other aspect that is quite interesting is notifications. So you may have a part of your ecosystem that fires an event, for example, the database just went down. And this enables that we show such notifications in the user environment. And there are a number of others. For example, searching for certain artifact that is involved with development. And we also said we are building in intelligence, so there is analytics that is using data science and machine learning to optimize the work. In the upper part, you can see the extensions. So there are a couple of common extensions. So the first extension that we built was for Kafka, as I mentioned. But you can imagine there is a MySQL extension where you have a database as a service. So the developer can say, I need a table in the MySQL, and the table gets created. This type of extension are somewhat more static. And you can imagine the interactions would be, here is the page, fill in the details, hit some build button, something will happen on some backend. There is a different kind of extensions that are including certain processes. For example, you can have Jenkins as an extension, and that would be the extension that is capturing your CI/CD process. We are currently working on the system that will allow extension that will handle workflow as a service. And that means that you will be able to define your workflow and submit it to the external for execution. And this would run in a fault-tolerant distributed environment and execute the tasks. You can imagine CI/CD could be one application, but you can also have general purpose workloads. So for example, at Netflix, you can use Netflix conductor and define a workflow in JSON, and this type of extension could execute it and possibly visualize. So this is kind of the extension of a somewhat greater complexity. For its operations, the console needs to preserve and maintain data. For that, we are using a console database, and we have the console store GraphQL API. So the console in its execution will be consulting this data source, and actually GraphQL was very important choice. We are building console today for the needs and the development of tools that will exist tomorrow. Therefore, flexibility is highly important. And that means that we will need to store and retrieve the data for which we don't know what is the schema today. So GraphQL gives you this flexibility. Console database, the actual data store that will solve that. is interesting technological story. Because when you think about data that you have in DevOps, what would be the natural data model for that? It would be a graph, because you have one node, one artifact, which is connected with another, which contains a variety of attributes and properties. They are being dynamically enhanced as a result of maybe tests and various validations and so on. So you would ideally like to put a graph database at the heart of the system. And graph database and GraphQL, they're just kind of perfect match for it. But then graph databases have some operational difficulties. And in our particular case, the graph database that we liked as a part of technical specifications, we did not like the price of support for that. So in our discussions, we have figured out database that is very well supported, and it will also be of advantage if we are thinking of open sourcing this, could be MySQL. MySQL in version 8 supports JSON as a column. And you can actually query such a database for the properties that are in the JSON document, which is really interesting. And that gives you this flexibility. And essentially, you get a hybrid database which is relational and document database like MongoDB, all in the same package. And that actually allows us to achieve simple operation, very reliable system, and GraphQL hides the implementation. So if at some point we decide to go with a different database system, we can easily do that, and it will be key. All right, so this is on the side of the console. So now let's look what is in an extension. The extension brings in the functionality that is expressed through APIs, and there is an implementation. The extension can bring the CLI plugin, so these are the commands that the user will execute on their laptop, and I'll talk more about this. And then there is a web user interface, all the various widgets and the panels that will be exposed. Eric is going to show us some really cool things about that. And you can also have the documentation. So the team that creates the extension, they're also responsible for the documentation. They put it in a certain format, and that will be exposed in the website. Now, how would console know what are the different parts? Well, for that, there is the extension manifest. Extension manifest is saying, this is the extension, let's say for Kafka. Arif is the developer, here is the contact information, this is the version 1.2.3. And then it is saying, you can talk to me at this API, at this IP address. And this is my CLI plugin, and this is the address for my web components. And why is that good? This is good because you become completely separated from the implementation technology for the extension. And that's important because our tool developers would like to write their extensions in Golang. Our web developers in Node. Our data guys and girls would do it in Python. So you have a variety of things that you need to support that. So you have the implementation of console being expressed through the API, yet independent from the actual technology. So when extension is being brought into life, the operator will execute command. It will say console add extension. They will pass the manifest file, and that will establish the connection. The UI will be pulled in, the CLI is going to be integrated, and you can start using such extension. So it's a plugin model. But there is something really interesting, you know. Working in a big company, one of the critical concerns is always the ownership. Who owns this? This is really, really critical concern. So, imagine on our example of an extension for Kafka, who owns what? Over here, you have the console that is run and operated by the console team. They don't own or operate extensions. All the way here, on the right-hand side, there is the Kafka infrastructure. So this is the Kafka team that is running a set of clusters that are processing messages at PayPal, millions of messages going every second. And they are taking care of the back functionality. So these guys don't know much, and they're also interested in creating the really cool tools for the end users. But here we have the Kafka extension. Kafka extension provides the experience for the users to interact with the system, provide them with the CLI and the web, and there is also one additional API that we want to have, which is the health API, so we can observe if the extension is functioning. And you see, this part is run and operated by the Kafka extension builder. This separation of responsibility is critical. These people know how to run big Kafka clusters. These people will be interested in creating really nice UI and CLI tools to interact with Kafka for end users. And the console team is expert in creating the environment for the extensions to run. Now, one of the really important things here, if the Kafka extension team mess up something and their extension dies, they cannot break anything else in the system. And this is important because this is going to be the ecosystem in which you have the execution of multiple tools. Also, you can imagine that some of these extensions may require multiple machines to run in order to handle the load. Now, if the operator of the extension recognizes, oh, this is getting now a little bit slow, they can, for example, increase the number of replicas that are serving the users and improve the performance. And they are owner of that, so they don't have to go and to complain to somebody, hey, my application is getting slow, can you do something? No, it is under their control. And imagine if you deploy, for example, such extensions on Kubernetes, you could do the auto-scaling, you increase the number of replica, and there are also great opportunities to implement these in a serverless fashion as well. So very, very effective way of developing this. Cool. So I will stop here with the architectural presentation, and I will go back to Uja.
I think this is the CLI.
This is the CLI. Oh, okay. You'll hear a few words more. All right. So we were talking about how the user interacts with this, and you know, the original solution that we had, the Altus solution, it had a really nice web user interface. And we always had developers who were nagging, hey, can we get a CLI? And actually, this is really important. So we did a survey, and it turns out lots of developers would really like to have the CLI. So I'll tell you a few words about that. I'll show you first how the interactions with the console look like. So imagine you want to add a new extension to the console. So you are in your terminal, and you would say console extension install Kafka YAML. So this install is the verb that is operating on the topic if you want extension. You pass in the Kafka YAML. Kafka YAML is saying, this is my URL for the UI, this is my CLI, and some other metadata. What happens after that? The console will establish the connections, the pull-in, the UI, and you get the report that the extension was installed. Okay, now the Kafka extension is there. So we want to check on that. So we say console extension list, and it lists Kafka in version 0. All right, so let's check how it is going. And notice what is happening here. Console Kafka status. Look at this. This Kafka part is interesting because that did not exist in the system before. So what is happening here? As we have been doing the onboarding of the extension, one piece of metadata is the repository where the CLI part for Kafka is stored. That gets dynamically downloaded. It gets installed on the laptop, and that all happens in 1 or 2 seconds, so very fast. And then all the commands and verbs from Kafka are available. And the beauty of that is that you also have a hierarchical help, so you could say console Kafka, and you get all the functionality. And you can go recursively, you can go deeper and deeper. All right, and then finally the user issues the command, console Kafka create topic, example topic, and at this point the extension talks to the backend Kafka implementation. The topic is created for the user, and you can see here console Kafka list, the user gets the example topic. So one of the really interesting things here is this part here that I mentioned, that the Kafka CLI functionality is dynamically downloaded on your laptop. It becomes local. The latency is super low because you're executing this locally. The console CLI actually brings in a whole range of interesting capabilities. So we wanted to have a nice auto-completion, even auto-completion that are for the things that are happening on the backend. So it is more than just simple bash completion that you have in your typical CLI. Then we also wanted to provide a range of really nice CLI widgets and prompts. So we have things like checkboxes, radio buttons, various progress bars. So even though that you are in terminal, you have a very rich experience. And it is also updating itself. So if there is the more updated version of the CLI plugin, it gets into it. So how are we going to build this? So we have been performing analysis of a variety of the CLI frameworks out there, and in fact, the very first version of our CLI was written in Golang. It performed beautifully. It was really fast, very simple and elegant code base, but it had one problem, and that is Golang does not support dynamic loading of components. There is a hack with which you can do it on Linux and a Mac, but on Windows you cannot do it. And this is something that is really kind of a hacking functionality. So around the same time, we have been following what else is happening in the CLI world, and it turned out that Heroku open sourced their framework. And they were sharing the story where they started with a nice CLI that was implemented in Node. Then they fell in love with Golang. They implemented it in Golang, got burned on inability to dynamically load components. They switched back to JavaScript, this time to TypeScript, a little bit more discipline, create a very rich set of nice widgets and capabilities and even the plugin functionality, and they release it to open source. And we looked into that, and we concluded this is the most impressive CLI framework that is on the market. And after the release, a number of companies switched to using that as their CLI framework. So we are building our functionality on top of this framework, which is called Open CLI Framework, or OCLIF. OCLIF is the foundation. Now, OCLIF is very nice, but it is not sufficient for us because we require a couple of more things. So, the console CLI is using OCLIF as its foundation, but then we are adding a set of really nice additional widgets. Enquirer is a library with very cool set of widgets for the CLIs. And being PayPal, security is an important part. So we have added security. And this security is dealing with role-based access control, but also additional thing. There is a single sign-on that we integrated with CLI. So you're in CLI, you want to use it for some command, and you are not logged in. Our CLI can switch you into the browser, you log in, go back to the CLI, and then you can continue. Or if you have already logged into the browser, you have a way to access that and then let you see the CLI. So this is the console CLI, and on top of that, we have the CLIs that are created by extensions. They would basically subclass the console CLI command, and they get all of these capabilities for free. And that is kind of really appealing for our developers. So, some of the really nice things that the OpenCLI framework provides is it provides for dynamic addition and removal of its components. It also has a self-update. There is a rich test suite, so you can validate the functionality. and it comes with the starter kit. And the starter kit is very important for easy onboarding, because here we are facing an interesting thing. The CLI is typically programmed in TypeScript. You can use JavaScript, but TypeScript is much nicer. You have to deal with the community of developers who are coming from Python, Java, Golang, and now you need to convince them, hey, you should write your CLI in TypeScript, even though that this is not necessarily their language for everyday programming. So this is important because when you show them how the CLI looks like and how does the code look like, the coding is very, very simple. And we actually had a student intern that has never seen console, that never seen any of this before. And I think in a day and a half, he created a CLI extension. So it is very easy. So that's very attractive property of this part. And now, let's take a look.
All right, I'll keep it short. I just wanted to share some of the UX concepts. You're going to see console in action now. And again, before we get started, I just want to tell you that I'm going to pretend to be an application developer at PayPal. I'm a web app developer and I have my web application. What I'm looking for right now is to start using Kafka as a messaging service for my application. So we'll see how we can do that with the console. Right, welcome to the console. We were talking about it being a natural workspace for developers. So I'll just walk you through a few things here. The idea is we're going with the notion of projects. Again, this is similar to if you use GCP, or the notion of projects is to kind of like have a showback or bucket them with projects. This also gives me a view of my resources, like how am I doing with my compute. And the idea is we don't just want to show them any information that's not meaningful or that's not actionable. The goal here is when we provide these insights, these contextual insights, we want to make sure developers have something that they can act on. For instance, this is actually telling me that one of my applications has been having abnormally high memory usage for the past 24 hours. It's really giving you those powerful insights so that you can take informed decisions. Until now, we also talked about personalizing the feed. So if you look at the feed, it's not just talking about an outage that's happening with one of our environments. It's actually telling me how my application that I'm working with is being impacted. So if I want to learn more, it actually tells me which application might be experiencing certain issues or performance issues because of the outage that we see. And similarly, this is again what's new view of what's going on in the console. And this is also interesting because this is my recent activity, especially from an auditability standpoint. It's important to kind of like capture these, especially in the fintech world where regulations and regulators are playing a key part. It's important for us to capture these kind of information as well. Let me show you the view for a Kafka. I'm here trying to see what I have from a product standpoint. Well, I see Kafka here. I want to learn more about it, so let me click on it. Now this is actually giving me an overview of what Kafka is and what I can do and how I can get started by leveraging this product or the solution that I have. So discovery through, excuse me, this view is made simple, and I'm also like learning more about what it offers, and I can start using it right from here, right? So let's say I want to create a new Kafka topic, just say create, pick an application, go through the flow, and boom, here's my application. Here's a new topic created for my application. I go here, it's actually, I'm in the app info view, and I can see that a new Kafka topic has been added. So this is a quick view of how console would work. And again, this is a concept right now. We have a great team that's heads down, working on the console initiative to make it a success story in the next few months. With that, the CLI, again, this is something we're working on. Vladimir talked about it. Search is going to be even more powerful, where you can start keying in CLI commands directly. And again, we're going through the InfoSec approval and all for that, but these are some concepts. With that, let me go back to the deck really to talk about some of the design ops aspects. Do you want to talk about it, Eric?
I haven't seen the slides in here. I'm Eric. I'm the UX lead for the console and DPX. And so we have an interesting challenge in our organization. Normal industry ratio for a UX designer is 1 to 10. Our reality is 1 to 311. It doesn't make any sense for us to actually scale to 1 to 10. We'd have to have a giant user experience team for an internal organization, which is a lot of money. So what we've come up with is we've got a ton of applications, none of them look the same. How do we bring this consistency across things in this console experience? How do we enable product teams to be successful? So what we've taken is a modified DesignOps approach. DesignOps is a methodology that's used to scale design across large design organizations. Where we've modified that is we're scaling across product organizations, product teams. So we're developing the tools and the guardrails for product teams to be able to deliver consistent, good user experience on their own. So what we're expecting is not only are development teams responsible for delivering secure code that is bug-free, but also a good user experience. So how do we enable them to do that? So I don't know what the next slide is. Oh. That was what I just said. So what we're doing is we're delivering a set of tools that integrate into the product development lifecycle. And one of the main things is we're working with a tool called UX Pen, and we have a UI framework that we are using from Microsoft called Fabric. That's what we're going to be using for the product. We've also built components that are using Fabric inside UX Pen. So product teams actually get templates and they get all these components and they can build and prototype their application or their extension inside UX Pen. They can test it, and the developers can actually kind of go into a spec mode and they can see which components are being used, how they're being used. They can see some of the JSON code and link directly to some of the documentation for that. And when we make changes to one of these components upstream, the change is applied down to the extensions. It's also applied automatically into the UX Pen prototype, so everything's updated all at once. So.
Thank you, Eric. We were thinking of doing a session just on that. It's really interesting to see how we are scaling the design deliverables through this process. With that, we'd like to conclude with a few key takeaways. First one being power of consistency is the key. And we started off the session by talking about how fragmented the experience is for developers at PayPal, and we want to make sure consistency is brought back into the mix. Scaling with the federated design production. Now we don't need UX designers on the team, so everyone on the team can now become a UX designer with the set of tooling that we have and the standards and governance and patterns that our UX team is putting in. And again, this is our message to the service providers, asking them not to reinvent the wheel again. So really come and leverage console for all the hooks that it provides. And this is my favorite one. The fine balance between governance and freedom. How much governance is too much governance? And it's, I think, I see a lot of nods, so it's probably something that most of us associate well with. And finally, it's been interesting to learn that what customers really want might not always be what they really need. So it's really upon us to kind of like figure that out and synthesize a solution that works best for their needs. With that, we'd like to thank you all for joining us, and thanks for the opportunity. It's been great.